I'm Amy Stamper. Welcome to the second in our three-part series of webinars, all on peak period. Today I'm going to be covering Don't Panic, your 3-month playbook for Black Friday success. So let's get started. At the time of recording this, you have 86 days. By the time you're watching it, it might be slightly less, but it's still crunch time at the time I'm recording this. So we're going to go over what we can do in the run-up to Black Friday and then during actual peak period itself to set you up for success. What's coming to mind is that you can have the best offer strategy in your industry, have the most compelling discounts, have the best kind of promotions out there during your peak period, but you'll never reach the full potential that you could do without making the most of your remaining time. Making preparation for the big event, so Black Friday, Q4 in general, increasingly important. I've split this part of my talk into 3 acts, so prepare, act, and react. And we'll go over what we can do in this 3-month period in the run-up to peak to get ready. So starting off in September, the next 30 days are the most important. This preparation isn't just about getting your creative early and getting your prices locked down. It's about building the right ways of working to ensure that you're living and breathing Black Friday prior to the event itself. And analysing last year is the key to predicting 2023. So firstly, your competition. What were they doing or what were they not doing? Looking at tools like SimilarWeb is really useful for seeing where they were spending their money, where they were getting their traffic from, so you can have an idea of the gaps and the opportunities for this year. Secondly, channel mix. So where were your audience coming from? Where did most of your purchases come from? What was your media mix like last year or even the year before? Look at Google Analytics and your post-campaign analyses to analyse where your biggest wins were and where you felt you could have pushed more. And then ways of working. This is a big one in Q4. It's a really busy time. So thinking about what didn't go so well from a management and execution point of view. Did you get your creatives quite late? Did your VIP offers not quite land with the email database as expected? Have an honest look back at last year, and then that'll inform some of your plans that you're going to make in this September. And a deliverable that I'd really recommend everyone to come out of September with is a full media plan. So it can look like this. They can look different to this. So this is just an example that we have. It's essentially the idea of getting it all on one page. We can share this media plan template if you don't have one already. So just contact us if you need this. But a few things that it should have what the campaigns are, where you're going to be activating, what your budgets are, your markets, and your expected KPIs, so that everyone, all your stakeholders, everyone that's working on Black Friday for you is all aware and is aligned with the plan. Great, so that was simple enough. Moving on to October, also known as the panic month, but it doesn't need to be. What you've done in September will already direct your priorities in October. So hopefully you've laid that groundwork and you're aware of what went wrong, what your media plan is going to be, and then what you need to focus on in October. As well as this, have a think about your October activity as well. It's not just a business as usual month. Q4 is starting to pick up now. Many brands are actually going quite early, as Isabella covered in her talk, the webinar before this. But October activity has to serve a purpose for November. So that's either going to be audience building, lead gen social campaigns, awareness investment, driving huge amounts of traffic through to your site. Even if people aren't quite in that purchase moment yet, it's definitely a time to keep audience building while CPMs are lower than they would be in November. Or we can start to build brand loyalty. So what can you offer in this period to ensure that shoppers won't head to a competitor over Black Friday? Are you going to think about free samples? Are you going to launch or improve your loyalty program? Are you going to start running offers for your email database? That's all thinking about how you can build those foundations for November and for peak season. Here's an example of something that we did. So last year we ran just 10k spend of lead gen activity throughout October, and it drove a 29 pence cost per lead. This is for a luxury skincare brand, and that meant that they had 30,000 more leads for their Black Friday promos, and users who they acquired through lead gen campaigns over the last few months prior to Black Friday last year actually performed some of the best. So really using paid media to drive not just its own channels, but your other channels as well. So by the time October, end of October comes around to Halloween, you should have an inflated audience pool. You should also have buckets of creative insight of what worked well and what didn't last year. And you should also implement and scheduled some of your activities. So starting to put some of those orders in place. So is it that simple? we're kind of on to November now. So October was the panic month. This month is, again, it's worrying for some people, but it doesn't need to be as long as we've got the right kind of plans in place. I think the biggest thing that comes up for myself and for my clients is that we need to know what competition are doing. And for that, we need as much information as possible. Competitor monitoring is really the biggest priority here. Unfortunately, with e-commerce businesses and with peak period in general, the market and nature of an offer-led period means that users are going to be more price-led, and it's really important that you don't just concentrate on what you need to do, that you're actually looking at the wider market and what they're doing to be able to act and react to it. Some basics, recommend doing daily website checks of your top competitors. Look at Google Trends, so especially the rising terms, you can see what terms are coming up in popularity and what people are actually searching for. Custom Google alerts, one of our favorites. Set up these now rather than in November if you can, but they can push out alerts to you if news articles come out. For example, if some of your competitors are getting lots of press about a particularly compelling offer that they're running, that can actually push through to your email inbox. So that's really easy to stick and monitor to that. And finally, auction insights, any paid media tools really, so you can see how the auction is actually going, what competitors are bidding on, and then what you might need to respond to. Okay, so that's kind of the run up to Black Friday. Preparing in September, acting in October, and reacting in November. If it all seems a little bit daunting to you, we do have another template to share. So this is an example Gantt chart. Each business might do things slightly differently, but here's how we would recommend doing things for an e-commerce business. Just email us for the details, and it contains recommendations for platforms like PPC, Meta, and all the activities that we've run over in order of when we should be doing them. So planning is all well and good, but it can also be in vain without expert execution. So this section of the talk will talk about something that you might be feeling now. So if Black Friday makes you feel like this, or a little bit frustrated, hopefully we can make you feeling a bit more like this. So expert execution, we'll go through in this section what to do the week before Black Friday and what to do on Black Friday itself, as well as some things that you perhaps shouldn't do. So the week before the big day. First things first, triple check your tracking. It's really important that things like pixels are firing correctly. Pixels are becoming increasingly more signal-based and more of an estimate rather than actual accurate tracking, but it's how all of the ad platforms get their information. So it's really important that they're firing as well as they can be and passing enough data back through to the ad platforms to make those bid adjustments and those strategies work to their best. So is pixel firing correctly? Have a look in Events Manager and see if anything is coming up as an error. Secondly, I hope everyone's got Conversions API by this point. There's similar things that you can do for Conversions API. So it's not just a set it and forget it kind of tool. It's time to make sure that things like conversions are coming through correctly, that your event match quality is really high, and also make sure it's not double counting between pixels and Conversions API, because I have seen that happen from time to time. Then can we optimize more? There's sliders that we can turn on for things like advanced or enhanced matching, which can be really useful to make sure that any first-party data can be passing back through to the platforms. And then I've already mentioned that pixels are increasingly imperfect, so CRM integrations, making sure that that's all set up and ideally running automatically. So if you're going to be running things like VIP offers just to your VIP audiences, or if you want it to be excluding your purchases and just going after new people, CRM integrations are the best way to make sure you're actually doing what you think you're doing. If you really need to, you can still upload some of this manually, but most CRMs link into platforms like Meta and Google by now. Next, it's time to lock everything down. Main one being copy and creative. So final sign off on copy and creative. There'll be no more changes in the week running up to Black Friday. That's not just for your designer's time and for your sake. It's also because we want to actually upload them into the platforms. You can upload them into Meta, actually set up all your ads, set up all your campaigns at least a week before. That means that you can pick up any things like errors or approvals or sizes that aren't quite right. And then definitely check your work. Ideally, something that we do in Impression is send it through to another member of our team to QA and look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. But if you don't have that, if you're running the account solo, then take a step back, and then log back into the platforms and have a checklist that you look through to make sure all of your URLs are correct, all of your copies doing what you want it to, and so on. Next, budgets. So you should already have, from all the work you did in September, October, your media plans, but you might want to reconfirm those in case anything's changed in the run-up to peak period. So you'll have obviously your target budget. That's your realistic budget. That's the budget which you've got down. You might want to have a minimum budget. So is there a minimum that you want to spend in order to get some learnings? But if things are much more competitive than you perhaps bargained for and you need to drop back, you may be just going to target your warm audiences, and how much budget might you need to do that and to effectively saturate those audiences? Or in a more positive way, what's the maximum? So what could you actually push to if it all goes really well? There may be an unlimited ceiling. There may be a ceiling of 20% above your target budget, but have those conversations now to avoid panic calls on Black Friday and potentially missing out on opportunities where you could be maximizing things more. Next, just like we prepare ourselves, we can budget prep for our accounts. So have a plan in place. Are you going to change things to lifetime budgets? Sometimes that can help when demand is in fluctuation. Changing things to lifetime on platforms like Meta can give the system a bit more flexibility to spend more on some days and less on other days, where if it's daily, it's pretty set to making those budgets. Enacting a plan for scaling. So are you going to ramp up slowly, like 20-25% a day, to avoid going back into learning phases? This is something that works pretty well if clients actually do go early, as Black Friday tends to happen earlier and earlier this year. So if you're ramping up your offering slowly, you might want to do the same with your budgets to avoid going back into learning on what is a really expensive day. Then also adding on any seasonality adjustments. So bid strategies, don't start suddenly getting really worried if you're spending a lot more than usual. Then cleaning up any rules and alerts. So if you've got budget set to a certain amount, but you usually spend a lot less than that, you don't want a rule coming in and automatically turning them back down. So cleaning up any old rules and alerts, and also setting new ones so that we don't have to manually check in the ad accounts multiple times a day to be able to get some notifications if CPAs suddenly start going way more than you want them to. So setting those all up at least a week before is a really good shout. Then we've mentioned having that media plan and what results that we kind of expect, what results we don't. I would use benchmarks to align on your expected results. And I think the two questions to ask are, how did last year perform? And how is this year trending versus last? This is a bit of a visualization of how you could approach it. So something that we can do is take our 2023 year-to-date actuals. So everything from your CPMs, your conversion rates, your click-through rates, your cost per clicks, your return on ad spend, and then look at your previous trends. So how did 2022, even 2022 and 2021 perform in terms of Q4 versus the rest of the year? So how much did your CPCs rise, or your CPMs rise, or your average order value increase or decrease for Q4 and Black Friday last year compared to the rest of the year? So I would take your 2023 year-to-date actuals as the base, add on top the percentage change, and that would then give you your 2023 peak forecast. Then I would also add on a little bit of common sense. So using that baseline, you know by now what your offering is going to be, what your sort of messaging is looking like. So you can upweight if that offer is a lot more compelling. If you're really going for it this year and you're doing something which is a lot more enticing than you've ever done before. Or you can also downweight. If your offer is a little bit more modest, maybe you're going for a value add rather than a massive discount this year, and or maybe you're not going down a discount-led strategy. It makes sense to downweight if your offer is less compelling or more modest than it has been in previous years. And then have these KPIs to hand so that you know what you're looking out for. Then confirm the plan of action for the big day. You're going to have a 10-minute call in the morning. Are you going to be sending emails? And if so, at what times? Especially if you're running a few different accounts. If you're agency-based or in-house, it's important to manage expectations so that you haven't got all of your time taken up on the day with multiple meetings, multiple calls, just in case you need to be on hand for any changes. Then a couple of tips to wind us down. So what to do on Black Friday. First thing when you come in, I've got a bit of a checklist for you. So as a basic, just check that everything is working. Did your rules flip everything over at midnight like you want them to? Did all the ads go through approvals fine? Are your landing pages all working? There's no errors there. Is your copy and creative all switched over? Those are the basics. If all of that switched over, then you can be pretty happy that your setup works as intended. Then moving on to the slightly more important area, once your basics are covered, is checking performance. So we're all keen to know, after all this work, how our offers are actually doing. So have a look into your reporting and see clicks, impressions, even conversions coming through as expected. It's obviously going to build up throughout the day or throughout the period whenever you're running your offers, but are those initial signs looking positive? If it's a little bit too early to tell, perhaps you've only set offers live that morning, or you need a bit more data to build through the ad accounts before you make any decisions, set that reminder to check again. And then let your team know, let your stakeholders know how things are looking, using some of those comms that you agreed in the week before Black Friday. Then, during the day itself, obviously you want to be reviewing things regularly, making sure that you're checking back in the ad accounts to see how things are performing. What I would also advise doing, especially if you're using a platform like Meta, is to check multiple data sources. So we have a data lag that we know of post iOS with things like the Pixel or even conversions APIs. So make sure you're checking things like GA and Meta to make sure that one platform isn't behind in terms of its reporting. Otherwise, you could end up making some decisions that you later would regret. And then breathe. Hopefully, you've done all the hard work by this point. So there's not much you can do sitting back and looking at how your conversions and your clicks are coming through. Then, just to round us up, a few things that I wouldn't advise doing on Black Friday itself, speaking from experience. So what not to do. I wouldn't advise making drastic changes. It can be really, really tempting to start changing your creative, changing your copy, launching a completely new offer that you haven't thought of before if things aren't going as well as you wanted them to. But actually, the majority of the time, you can end up doing more harm than good because you're forcing your ads to go back into learning on what is the most expensive day of the advertising year. So try not to make drastic changes. And then don't be stingy with your bids. It's not necessarily the time to optimize for the lowest CPM possible. We know that a lot of advertisers are going to be running things at the same time. You can actually find sometimes if you've been too stingy with your bids that your ads just aren't delivering due to competition. So I would open those up as much as possible so you can at least get some spend through the ad accounts and give your ads a chance to start running. And it's also not the time to test something entirely new. There's new stuff coming out all the time, but it's not the moment over Black Friday to test Advantage campaign shopping if you've never tried them before. It's also not necessarily the time to test a completely new creative route that you've never had any indication of how that's going to perform. So definitely put up some A/B tests, try some different variety, but I wouldn't test something that you've got no idea how it's going to perform. Go with something that's built on all the learnings that you've had for this year so far. So in summary, lock down your plans and keep calm over Black Friday. That's the end of this webinar. Thank you ever so much for listening. There's a next webinar in our series all on how to effectively measure and report on your peak period performance. So head to the link to our final webinar to view that now. Thank you very much.